somewhere in some remote and fearsome region. I cannot name. Dennis Barry has gone. I was with him on the last night. He lived among men. I heard his screams when the thing came to him. Afterwards, the peasants and the police of County Meath searched long and far, yet neither Barry nor the others were ever found. And since that time, I have never heard frogs in marsh water without a shudder, nor looked upon the moon in lonely places without remembering Kilderry. I had known Dennis Barry well in America, where he had grown rich, and I had congratulated him when he bought back the old castle by the bog at sleepy Kilderry. It was from Kilderry that his father had come, and it was there that Barry wished to enjoy his wealth among ancestral scenes. Men of his blood had once ruled there, but for generations the castle had stood empty and decaying. After he went to Ireland, Barry wrote me often, telling how the grey castle was rising again, tower by tower, under his care, and how the ivy was climbing once more over the restored walls as it had climbed so many centuries ago. He wrote, too, that the peasants blessed him for bringing back the old days, with his gold from over the sea. For a time it seemed that Kilderry itself welcomed him home. But in time, troubles came. The peasants ceased to bless him and fled away instead, as men flee from a doom already drawing near. Then Barry sent me a letter and asked me to visit him. He was lonely in the castle, with no one to speak to, save the new servants and laborers he had brought from the north. I reached Kilderry in the summer sunset, as gold from the sky lit the green hills and groves and the blue of the bog, where on a far islet a strange old ruin gleamed white and spectral. It was very beautiful, and yet the peasants at Ballylough had warned me against it. Barry's motor met me at the Ballylough station, for Kilderry lies far from the railway. The villagers had shunned the car and the driver from the north, and when they saw that I was going to Kilderry, they whispered to me with pale faces. That night, after our reunion, Barry told me why. The cause of all these troubles, he said, was the bog. For all his love of Ireland, America had not left him untouched. He hated that beautiful wasted space where peat might be cut and land laid open, and he meant to drain the great bog. The legends and superstitions of Kilderry did not move him. He laughed when the peasants first refused to help, and later when they cursed him and went away to Ballylough with their few belongings. He still would not listen. In their place, he sent for laborers from the north, and when the servants left, he replaced them likewise, but it was lonely among strangers. That was why he had asked me to come. When I heard what had driven the people away, I laughed as loudly as Barry, for their fears were vague, wild, and absurd. They spoke of a grim guardian spirit dwelling in the strange old ruin on the far islet. There were tales of dancing lights in the dark of the moon, and of chill winds when the night was warm. The peasants spoke of these things as if the bog itself remembered something older than men. They told, too, of wraiths in white hovering over the waters, and of an ancient city of stone lying deep beneath the swampy surface. It was all fantastical, and yet the image stayed with me. But strongest of all was the one belief they shared alike, that a curse awaited any man who should dare to touch or drain that vast reddish morass. There were secrets there, they said, which must not be uncovered. They spoke of ages beyond history, of Partholin and the children of forgotten years, and old men in Kilderry said that one city had been overlooked, left beneath the hills, and under the mercy of its patron moon goddess, when the men of Nemd swept down out of Scythia. Such were the tales that had driven the villagers away, and when I heard them, I did not wonder that Barry had refused to listen. For he cared greatly for antiquities, and meant to explore the bog thoroughly, once it had been drained. The white ruin on the islet Barry had often visited, but it was too old and too broken to yield its secret. Now the work was ready to begin. Soon the laborers from the north would strip the forbidden bog of moss and heather and kill the tiny shell-paved streamlets and the quiet blue pools fringed with rushes. A servant showed me to my room, high in a remote tower, overlooking the village, the plain, and the bog itself. From those windows, I could see, in the moonlight, the silent roofs. The peasants had fled, the church, with its antique spire, and far across the brooding bog, the white old ruin on the lonely islet. Just as I dropped towards sleep, I fancied that I heard faint sounds from the distance. They were wild and half musical, and stirred in me a weird excitement, which passed at once into my dreams. In sleep, my mind hovered about a stately city, in a green valley where marble streets and statues, villas and temples, carvings and inscriptions, all spoke in certain tones of the glory that was Greece. When I told this dream to Barry, we both laughed, but I laughed the louder because Barry was perplexed about his laborers from the north. For the 6th time, they had all overslept, waking very slowly and dazedly, as if sleep itself had failed to restore them. That morning and afternoon, I wandered alone through the sunlit village, speaking now and then with idle laborers, while Barry was busy with his final plans for beginning the drainage. The laborers were not at ease. Most of them seemed troubled by some dream which they had had, yet which they tried in vain to remember. I told them of my dream, but they took no interest until I spoke of the weird sounds I thought I had heard. Then they looked at me oddly and said that they too seemed to remember strange sounds. That evening, Barry dined with me and announced that he would begin the drainage in 2 days. I was glad, for though I hated to see the heather, the streams, and the little blue pools depart, I had begun to wish to know what ancient secrets the deep peat might hide. That night, my dreams of flutes and marble peristyles came to a sudden and disquieting end upon the city in the valley. I saw a pestilence descend, and then a frightful avalanche of wooded slopes that covered the dead in the streets. Only one place was left unburied, the temple of Artemis, on the high peak, where the aged moon priestess Cleis lay cold and silent, with a crown of ivory upon her silver head. I awoke suddenly and in alarm. For some time, I could not tell whether I was waking or still asleep, for the sound of flutes still rang shrilly in my ears. Then a clock, far below, struck 2, and I knew I was awake. Yet still there came that monotonous piping from afar, wild, weird airs that made me think of some dance of fauns on distant Manalis. It would not let me sleep. In impatience, I sprang up and paced the floor. Only by chance did I go to the north window and look out upon the silent village and the plain at the edge of the bog. I had no wish to gaze abroad, but the flutes tormented me. How could I have suspected the thing I was to behold? There in the moonlight that flooded the spacious plain was a spectacle which no mortal, having seen it, could ever forget. To the sound of reedy pipes echoing over the bog, the plain, the golden moonlight, and the shrill monotony of that music seemed to belong to some revel older than memory. There glided, silently and eerily, a mixed throng of swaying figures reeling through such a dance as men might once have dreamed under some forgotten harvest moon. And amidst my fear I saw that half of those tireless mechanical dancers were the laborers whom I had thought asleep. The other half were strange, airy beings in white, half indeterminate in nature, yet pale, wistful, and unearthly. They suggested to me pale, wistful naiads from the haunted fountains of the bog, and the whole spectacle seemed less like life than like some memory left behind by a buried world. The wide plain, the golden moonlight, the shadowy moving forms, and above all, that shrill piping almost paralyzed me. I do not know how long I watched. And then, before I knew it, I dropped into a dreamless swoon, from which the high sun of morning awakened me. My first impulse, on waking, was to tell Denisbury all that I had seen, but as I saw the sunlight through the eastern lattice, I became certain that there could have been no reality in such a vision. So I contented myself with questioning the laborers who had slept late again and could recall nothing of the night, save misty dreams of shrill sounds. This matter of the spectral piping harassed me greatly, and for the first time, I felt something of the same fear which had driven the peasants away. For some unknown reason, I dreaded the thought of disturbing the ancient bog and its sunless secrets. Later, I watched Barry in the library, bending over his plans for the great work that was to begin on the morrow. And seeing him thus, I felt more keenly than ever the danger of bringing to light whatever lay hidden beneath that age-old peat. It seemed to me injudicious that such secrets should be brought to light, and I began to wish for an excuse to leave the castle and the village. I even spoke casually to Barry, but did not dare continue after hearing his resounding laugh. So I was silent when the sun set fulgently over the far hills, and Kilderry blazed all red and gold in a light that seemed less like evening than like a portent. That evening I could not rest. The tower room seemed darker than before, and the waning moon, beyond the lattice, looked cold and watchful. I knew that some crisis was drawing near. When sleep came, it brought no peace again. I beheld the city in the valley, but now its marble splendor lay in shadow, as if some doom had long since claimed it and left behind only memory and desolation. Then once more, I awoke, not gently, but as if torn out of sleep by that same unearthly piping, now louder, nearer, and more insistent than before. At first I thought the moon had changed, for the chamber was no longer silvered, but flooded with a terrible crimson light that trembled across the floor and walls. In a panic, I sprang from the bed and dressed, thinking only of flight, yet some stronger impulse drove me again to the window, though I dreaded what I might see. Then I saw that the red radiance poured from the old ruin on the distant islet. No ruin now, did it seem, but a living center of fire and power, casting its glare across the bog and the plain. And in that monstrous light, the broken stone seemed restored, rising in dreadful beauty as a marble temple whole, majestic and impossible, as if the buried centuries had suddenly fallen away. Now the piping was joined by the throb of drums, and the whole red night seemed to pulse with some vast ceremonial horror, older than man and crueler than death. Against that frightful temple, I saw dark forms moving, small at first, yet unmistakable, as if shapes long hidden beneath the earth had come forth to claim again their ancient place. And then the white-clad throng began to move again, not outward now, but backward, retreating in measured rhythm across the plain, toward the crimson waters of the bog. Among them I knew again the laborers from the north, moving as if no dream, no sleep, and no waking will remain to them, but only obedience to that infernal music. Then I saw that the servants from the castle too had joined that dreadful line, so that no human life about Kilderry seemed left untouched by the summons of the red-lit night. Step by step, the white things, the laborers and the servants, passed onward until the bog itself received them. There was no struggle. They vanished into the red waters, as if returning to a home older than the world above. Then, as suddenly as it had flared, the red radiance went out. The ruin was a ruin again. The village, the plain, and the bog lay only under the pallid moon. And in that instant I knew that the village was lost, and that somewhere below in the castle, Denisbury remained alone, with whatever power had risen from the bog. Then from below there rose a scream so terrible that all the night the bog, the temple, and the dead procession seemed gathered into that one cry. It was the voice of Denisbury. At that cry my courage broke utterly. I remember only incoherent prayers and a frenzy of fear such as no ordered mind could hold. Then I fled down the stairs, through the passages, past the doors of the silent castle, and out at last into the night, caring nothing where I went, so long as I went away. At dawn they found me wandering near Ballylaw, half mad, praying and unable to tell coherently what I had seen or heard. And afterward, when I looked again toward the bog, I saw that its waters, once so still, were alive with monstrous frogs gathered there in numbers beyond belief. Nor did they croak as frogs should. They crouched and stared upward as if watching for something above the ruin, above the bog and above the moonlit air itself. Then I saw a pale beam of light, thin and trembling, stretching from the ruin, upward toward the moon. Along that pallid path there moved a dark, writhing shadow, slowly climbing, as no earthly shape should climb between the world below and the moon above. And as I stared, I knew with a certainty worse than doubt that the thing upon that beam bore the obscene likeness of Denisbury. That is why I cannot hear frogs in marsh water, nor look upon the moon in lonely places without remembering Kilderry, the bog, and Denisbury.